Good evening to you, Kala and Craig. Osborne Playground, according to the sign, closes at dusk, but the gates behind me never close. And as neighbors have pointed out, the park is really dimly lit and there are rarely any police patrols, even after an 18-year-old woman was gang raped here Thursday night. Police tonight released this surveillance video taken from a nearby bodega believed to be of the 5 suspects before they gang raped the 18-year-old woman near the handball court in Osborne Playground.
That's sad, because we have a lot of young girls out here. And and everybody's not bad. But I don't know. I'm sorry to hear that.
Where was the cops all that long time they had the girl in the park? Where was the cops?
Neighbors in Brownsville were just hearing the news that the 18-year-old woman was walking with her father when police say this group of 5 men confronted them, showed a handgun, and ordered the father to leave. Police say as he called police, the 18-year-old woman was raped by all 5 men. By the time police arrived, the men had fled.
I just thought it was, a shame that a young lady can't walk down the street with her father without being raped. A lady should be able to walk anywhere she wants in these streets without some thugs gang raping her. And I just hope that these thugs are caught and brought to justice.
NYC park advocate Jeffrey Croft says there were more than 500 violent crimes in city parks last year, and yet there are no nighttime patrols. How can Osborne Playground be made more safe?
Well, they can lock the playground at night when it's supposed to be closed. And they can also, the city needs to dramatically step up the hiring of park enforcement. They're the only dedicated law enforcement for parks. And the elected officials keep saying how important park safety is, but they're not funding them.
Police were handing out leaflets about the rape, and with this new surveillance video, they are hoping the public will help find these suspects. We're in Brownsville, Brooklyn. McGee, Hickey, Pix 11 News. Back to you, Kala and Craig.
Innocent until proven guilty, huh? Before I get into how the mainstream media manipulates us through how it communicates us, the news, and the information, I need you to understand this. Information is important. And if all of the information we receive from the mainstream media is looked at as honest and thoughtful, then that information will shape our thoughts and opinions, whether we believe it or not. Now, as far as this rape case, which took place in Brownsville, where 5 young African-American males were accused of accosting an 18-year-old woman with her father and brandishing a weapon, essentially forcing him to leave the scene before taking turns raping and assaulting her in the park. Before I go any further, as a father of a teenage daughter, that couldn't have happened to me. Now, as a father, for him to allow his daughter to be fed to the wolves says a lot about him as a man and his credibility. They would have had to kill me right then and there to get my daughter. So the father's reaction, attempting to run to a store or bodega to alert the authorities, that within itself was suspicious to me and was kind of an alarm bell. That's number one. Number two, if these young men were raping this woman and assaulting her, why would they allow her father to leave, to escape? Wouldn't they assume, if they're committing a crime, that if there's a witness and the witness is allowed to escape, the first thing that they would do would be to alert the authorities? I mean, that does make sense, doesn't it? Another thing was the NYPD statements that were released after, I guess, they collected the evidence related to this crime. I don't know what the protocol is as far as when the police are investigating a crime with how they release that information to the media, but from the very beginning, the rhetoric surrounding this alleged incident was pretty much sensationalized. The crime, the act, everything itself was looked at like it was very brutal. It was bad. It was a violent crime. And I think the mainstream media essentially ran with that, much like they do with many other stories. And once we, as the public, began to consume that information that the media was feeding us, the outrage and the reactions were justified if this crime actually took place. And just looking around and conversating with people around me, looking at people's responses on social media, people were very outraged. They were very angry. They were disgusted, and they looked at this crime as something that was very, very bad. But there's always a twist to the story. And before I get into that, I want you to see how the mainstream media approached this.
Calls for unity tonight as police search for a fifth suspect in an alleged gang rape in Brooklyn. Local police, local leaders say that this type of violence has no place in their community. CBS 2's Tracy Crosco is live now in Prospect Heights with more for us. Tracy, what can you tell us?
Well, now 4 of those suspects are being held here at the Special Victims Unit, and we've just learned from police sources that 2 of those suspects here have prior juvenile records. One was arrested for attempted murder, the other arrested for attempted robbery. Now, sources also tell us that police have identified that 5th suspect. They're still looking for him. He's on the run. They do believe he is the ringleader, the one with the gun, and community leaders say they want him off the streets. Putting up a united front, community leaders in Brownsville, Brooklyn gathered in the same playground where police say the disturbing assault took place, demanding the 5th suspect turn himself in.
We want to tell that individual who is out there that we will not rest as churches, as community leaders, until he is apprehended and faces the full extent of the law.
Sources tell us 2 of the suspects, both 15 years old, were turned in by their parents. The other 2, ages 14 and 17, were found by investigators on Sunday.
You're not going to rape women in our community and think you're going to get away with it.
Sources tell CBS 2 the 18-year-old victim was drinking alcohol in Osborne Park last Thursday night with her father when police say these 5 teens seen on surveillance video approached them. One of the teens allegedly pointed a gun at the father and ordered him to leave. The father tells these community activists he ran to the store asking to use their phone, but was denied. At the same time, police say the suspect took turns raping his daughter. The group marched from the playground and stormed into the store today looking for answers from employees.
He feels bad for the situation, but he was not the one here to make the decision.
It's unclear how urgently the father expressed his request. We pressed the store owner for his side of the story, but he refused to talk. Owner? Are you?
Yeah, your side, please.
Can you tell us why?
Your side, no, your side.
However, other store employees in the area tell us customers are constantly asking to use their phones.
The people hanging outside, we ain't give nobody. But for emergency, no problem.
So, do people ask a lot?
Yeah, a lot.
Now, sources tell us that 2 of the suspects here in custody have said that the incident with the woman was consensual. Now, charges have not yet been filed. Reporting live from Brooklyn, Tracy Carrasco, CBS 2 News.
Hi, Tracy. Just minutes ago, we learned 4 people are in police custody in connection with the rape of a teenager in Brownsville. 1 suspect is still on the loose.
Eyewitness News reporter Safan Kim is outside the 73rd precinct now with these new details. Safan?
Well, Sandra and Joe, it is an unthinkable crime, and police say charges are now pending on those 4 suspects. They range in age from 14 to 17 years old. The victim and the victim's father tell Eyewitness News they felt helpless because one of these individuals had a gun.
One of them put a gun in my face, tell me to run, and all of them had their way with her.
The father of the 18-year-old woman allegedly gang raped by 5 individuals says he had no other choice but to run for help. And then one by one, they raped his daughter. Police released this surveillance video taken from a bodega not far from where the alleged attack occurred. Cops say it captured the suspects before the alleged rape Thursday night just after 9. The victim and her dad spoke with Eyewitness News reporter Kimberly Richardson. We are not using their names or showing their faces.
Do you hope this video gets these guys?
Absolutely.
The father says he was with his daughter near the handball court at Osborne Park having a drink when the 5 individuals approached. He says he didn't have a cell phone. He eventually found 2 uniformed NYPD officers, ran back to the playground about 15 minutes later, but the suspects were gone.
If I would have stood there and fought, you know, yeah.
You thought you would have died?
Yeah.
The victim says she screamed for help, but no one stopped.
Some new information today into the alleged gang rape of a 18-year-old woman at a Brooklyn playground. Law enforcement sources tell CNN the victim's father ran to a bodega screaming for help, but was told to leave the store because he appeared drunk or incoherent. He and his daughter had been at the playground drinking beer when the dad says the attackers pulled a gun and forced him to leave and then raped his daughter. Police released this surveillance video right here of the suspects. 4 of them, all teenagers, are now in custody, while police are still hunting for one more suspect. And according to law enforcement sources, at least one of the teens told investigators the sex was consensual. But the 18-year-old and her dad say that's definitely not the case.
One of them put a gun in my face, tell me to run, and all of them had their way with her.
Do you hope this video gets these guys?
Absolutely.
When your dad left you, what were you thinking?
I was just real scared. I didn't know what to do. I was in a panic mode.
She just fell to the floor, you know, she collapsed, like, she went crazy.
Good evening to you, Craig and Kala. Now, community leaders had urged the parents of the teens involved to turn their children in, and apparently that is what happened. 2 15-year-olds with their parents surrendered at the 73rd Precinct Station House earlier this evening. The 2 15-year-olds can be seen on the videotape at the bodega minutes before the attack on an 18-year-old woman in the playground, Osborne Playground. Now, these 2 15-year-olds are not considered suspects at this time. They are considered persons of interest wanted in connection with that gang rape. Community leaders gathered in front of the 73rd Precinct to urge the other 3 men, young men. At first, we believed they were in their 20s and 30s. Now it is appearing that they are all teenagers. They are urging the other 3 to surrender as well. All 5 teens were seen in that videotape at the bodega. The community leaders are particularly concerned about the gunman surrendering to police. Now, earlier today, also, the Brooklyn Borough president questioned how police handled the response to this rape.
You know, I want to thank those that have actually made the phone calls, and I want to thank those parents that were responsible enough to walk these 2 individuals in who are persons of interest. They've not been arrested yet. They're just being interviewed. But what we want to say, and I think you'll hear it as a cohesiveness here, we want those individuals off the street that committed this crime.
Why it took 2 days for the community to know that a young woman was raped.
Why did it take 2 days before this was reported? The members of this community should be notified immediately when you have such a savage assault with a handgun and a rape.
Now, also tonight, the NYPD released a statement saying there was no delay in their response to the gang rape. There was no 911 call. The father of the victim looked for a uniformed police officer. That took about 15 minutes for him to find an officer and get back to the playground. The NYPD also says that there was no delay in releasing the surveillance video. As soon as they found out there was surveillance video, they released it to the public. We are live in Brownsville, Brooklyn. McGee, Hickey, Pix 11 News. Back to you, Craig.
As of January 15th, 2016, all 5 of the suspects that were accused in this incident have been released from jail. Even though the case isn't completely closed, there isn't sufficient evidence for an indictment on any of these young men involved. It's obvious that there are holes in the police investigation where they didn't do their due diligence in reference to gathering pertinent information before all of the details of their investigation were leaked to the media. You see, the mainstream media is no longer about journalism. It's no longer about breaking stories. It's simply about tabloid type stories. What makes the news? What's going to get viewers? So what you have is a cycle of the same information, the same news, simply regurgitated over and over through every channel throughout the entire news cycle of a day. But not to get too far off track, with a crime of this nature, rape and assault, there's always a consensus among the public to get justice and to get justice swiftly. But we have to remember, in the pursuit of justice, we have to have the facts, we have to have the knowledge, and we definitely need all of the information. And when we receive information from the mainstream media, how do we digest it? Let me give you an example. Did you notice that 2 of the accused young men's criminal records were revealed, or their pending charges, whatever the case may be? But I noticed this is always done to criminalize black youth when they're either being accused of a crime or shot dead by law enforcement. Did you notice how many of the accused claimed the sex was consensual, but this was ignored? Did you notice how the media sensationalized this incident when all of the facts and information related to it were not available? Did you notice all of the anger and the outrage that the community felt, that law enforcement felt? But it's been proven that the young woman and her father are basically lying. One of the young men was labeled as a ringleader with the gun and being on the run. But do you notice how the media admits that the father was drinking with his underage daughter? Is it even his daughter? We still have to question that. And of course, there have been a lot of admitted mistakes by the NYPD. But who do we hold accountable? Because at the end of the day, no one has issued a public apology to these young men. And I have to wonder if this alleged video of the incident wasn't available, would these young men still be in jail? Would they get railroaded? Would a case be built against them to find them guilty? I really have to question that. But today we know that they are free because there isn't enough evidence for an indictment. And we do know that there is a video clip out there that can basically exonerate them and prove that the entire incident wasn't rape. It was consensual sex. And this young woman may have been a willing participant in it. Who knows? Still a lot of questions. The case is still open. But let's hear from the new district attorney.
Kicked off the second year in office for Brooklyn DA Ken Thompson.
If the second year is anything like the first, well, DA Thompson is poised to make national headlines like he did when he was, well, his first year at Brooklyn DA. So joining us this morning is Ken Thompson. So nice to have you here, DA Thompson. Before we get to the gun court, which is obviously going to make big headlines, let's talk about a headline that's been dominating this week. And of course, we're talking about the Brownsville rape case. An indictment was expected today in the case, but in a surprise move yesterday, you decided to release all 5 suspects. I know this is still still under investigation. Don't know what you could say, but seems like there's lots of layers to this case, and I think the public is just trying to figure out where do we all stand. Seems like there's lots of layers to this case, and I think the public is just trying to figure out where do we all stand. Seems like there's lots of layers to this case, and I think the public is just trying to figure out where do we all stand on this. So can you set the record straight for us, sir?
Well, it's clear that this case is a top priority for my office. It's a top priority for the NYPD. And we're going to look at every piece of evidence in the case, all aspects of the case under investigation. And because we're determined to get to the truth about what happened in that park, we need more time to investigate this very complex matter and to gather more evidence before we can proceed any further.
And now you have an additional couple months to actually do that and to get to the bottom of it before you take a next step. Is that essentially what's happening?
I don't think it's going to take a couple of months.
Okay.
I made a decision yesterday because we were not going to be in a position today to go into the grand jury. And so under state law, I had to make a hard decision, and I made that decision. But no one has been exonerated. It means that we are going to look at this case very carefully like we have. Many of my sex crime prosecutors are on this case in the Brooklyn DA's office. NYPD detectives are working on this case overnight, all the time. It is a priority for Brooklyn. It's a priority for the city. And we're going to get to the truth.
Okay, for sure.